Sarah's hands trembled as she held the photograph she'd found tucked between the pages of a rare first edition her federal marshal protector, David Martinez, shaking hands with Vincent Torino, the very man whose trial she was supposed to testify against in 3 days. The image had fallen from David's jacket when he'd draped it over her bookshop chair that morning, and now everything she thought she knew about the man who'd been protecting her for 6 months crumbled like ancient paper. The timestamp showed it was taken just 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks after David had sworn to her that Torino's reach couldn't extend to their small Montana town. 2 weeks after she'd finally allowed herself to believe she was safe. "Sarah?" David's voice called from the front of the shop, warm and familiar as always. "I brought lunch from that cafe you like." She quickly slipped the photograph into her pocket, her heart hammering against her ribs. How long had he been playing both sides? How long had she been living a lie wrapped in his protective arms? 6 months ago, Sarah Chen had been nothing more than Elena Vasquez, a quiet bookstore owner in Seattle who'd witnessed Vincent Torino execute a rival crime boss. In the alley behind her shop, she'd been closing up late, taking out the trash, when she'd seen the flash of the gun and the man fall. Torino's cold eyes had met hers through the window, and in that instant, her old life had ended. The FBI had swept her away within hours, creating Elena Vasquez's death in a staged car accident and birthing Sarah Chen in the mountains of Montana. New name, new hair color, new life, and David Martinez as her lifeline to sanity. David was everything she'd never expected in a federal marshal. Where she'd imagined someone cold and professional, he was warm and genuine. Where she'd expected distance, he offered companionship. He'd helped her set up the new bookshop, spent evenings teaching her to cook Mexican dishes his grandmother had shown him, and slowly, carefully, helped her rebuild not just her identity, but her faith in human connection. "There you are," David said, entering the back room with containers of food. His smile was the same one that had made her feel safe for months, but now it felt like a mask. "You look pale. Everything all right?" Sarah forced herself to meet his dark eyes, searching for some sign of deception she'd missed. But he looked exactly as he always did, concerned, protective, caring. Either he was an exceptional actor, or there was an explanation for the photograph that her panicked mind couldn't grasp. "Just tired." She lied, accepting the container of soup he offered. "The altitude still gets to me sometimes." David moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same scent that had comforted her through nightmare and panic attacks. His hand brushed her forehead, checking for fever, and the gentle touch that had once made her feel cherished now made her want to flee. "Maybe you should rest this afternoon," he suggested. "I can mind the shop." The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who might be betraying her to a killer was offering to watch her business, to care for the life he'd helped her build. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice, and watched as David began unpacking their lunch with the same methodical care he brought to everything, including, apparently, her potential destruction. Sarah spent the afternoon in her apartment above the bookshop, staring at the photograph until her eyes burned. Every memory of the past 6 months felt contaminated now, viewed through the lens of potential betrayal. Had David's gentle touches been manipulation? Had his stories about his family been lies designed to make her trust him? She remembered their first kiss 3 months ago, soft and hesitant in the moonlight behind the shop. He'd pulled away, conflict written across his features. "This complicates things." He'd whispered against her forehead. "I know," she'd replied, but she'd kissed him again anyway. Now she wondered if his reluctance hadn't been about professional ethics, but about the difficulty of betraying someone you were sleeping with. The bell above the shop door chimed, and Sarah heard David's voice mixing with that of a customer. She crept to the top of the stairs, straining to listen, but it was just Mrs. Henderson asking about a romance novel she'd special ordered. Normal, everyday life continuing while Sarah's world fell apart. When evening came, David climbed the stairs to her apartment as he had every night for the past month. He'd started staying over after a break-in attempt at a house 2 streets over, or at least that's what he'd told her. Now she wondered if he'd staged the incident to justify moving closer, to keep better tabs on her. "Feeling better?" he asked, settling beside her on the small couch. Sarah studied his profile as he reached for the remote, the strong line of his jaw, the slight scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident he'd described in detail, or had that been fiction too? Everything felt false now, including her own responses to his presence. "David," she began, then stopped. "How did you ask someone if they were planning to hand you over to a killer?" "What is it?" queried the endearment in Spanish that had always made her heart flutter now sounded like mockery. She pulled out the photograph with shaking hands. "I found this in your jacket." The change in David's expression was instantaneous. His warm brown eyes went cold and watchful, his body tensing like a predator's. For a terrifying moment, Sarah saw a stranger sitting beside her, someone capable of violence, someone she didn't know at all. "Where exactly did you find this?" His voice was carefully controlled. "It fell out when you hung your jacket on the chair this morning." Sarah's voice cracked. "David, please tell me there's an explanation. Please tell me you haven't been." "Haven't been what?" The coldness in his tone made her shiver. "Haven't been doing my job. Haven't been keeping you alive. Your job isn't to meet with the man who wants me dead." David stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His hand moved instinctively to where his gun rested beneath his jacket, and Sarah's blood turned to ice. Was he calculating whether to silence her now, before she could run? "You don't understand the situation," he said finally. "Then explain it to me." Sarah stood too, putting the couch between them. "Explain why my protector is shaking hands with Vincent Torino." David turned, and for a moment, she saw something raw and pained in his expression. "Because sometimes the only way to catch a monster is to make him think you're on his side." The words hung between them like a bridge Sarah was afraid to cross. Either David was telling the truth and involved in some deep undercover operation, or he was a skilled liar buying time to figure out what to do with her. Outside, night was falling over the small Montana town that had become her sanctuary. In 3 days, she would testify against Vincent Torino. In 3 days, she would either help put away a killer or discover that the man she'd fallen in love with had been selling her safety to the highest bidder. "I want to believe you," she whispered. David's expression softened slightly. "Then trust me, just for 3 more days." But trust, once broken, was like trying to hold water in cupped hands. No matter how tightly Sarah tried to grasp it, she could feel it slipping away. Sarah barely slept that night, hyper-aware of David's breathing beside her, of the weight of his arm across her waist, of the gun he kept on the nightstand. Every shadow seemed to hide threats. Every sound could be Vincent Torino's men coming to finish what they'd started in Seattle. When dawn broke, David was already gone, leaving only a note: "Emergency meeting. Back by noon. Stay inside." Sarah stared at the paper, analyzing his handwriting as if it might reveal his true intentions. The same careful script that had written her sweet notes and grocery lists now felt ominous. Was he meeting with his FBI handlers, or with Torino himself? She tried to maintain normal routines, opening the bookshop, arranging displays, helping customers, but her hands shook as she handled the register, and she jumped every time the bell chimed. Mrs. Henderson noticed her distress and lingered. After purchasing her romance novel, "You look troubled, dear," the older woman said kindly. "That handsome marshal of yours treating you right?" Sarah forced a smile. "Just pre-trial nerves." "Ah, yes. David mentioned you'd be testifying soon." "Brave of you." Mrs. Henderson patted Sarah's hand. "He's a good man, that one. Been asking around town about the best security systems, wanting to make sure you're protected even after." She trailed off, realizing she might be saying too much. "After what?" Mrs. Henderson looked uncomfortable. "After the trial ends and he has to move on to his next assignment. He's been trying to find ways to keep you safe when he's not here." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. David was planning for a future without him in it, trying to protect her even after he left. Either he was the most dedicated double agent in history, or she'd gravely misjudged the photograph's meaning. When David returned at noon, he carried flowers, white roses, her favorites, and looked exhausted. "We need to talk," he said, setting the roses on the counter. Sarah's heart hammered. "About what?" "About what happens after Tuesday." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "About the photograph. About us." They closed the shop early and walked to the small park at the edge of town, where David had first told her stories about his childhood in Texas. The same bench where they'd shared their first kiss now felt like a witness stand. The photograph David began was taken during a sting operation. We've been trying to get close to Torino's organization for months, and I volunteered to go undercover. Sarah studied his face. Why you? Because I had the perfect cover story: a federal marshal who'd grown tired of low pay and bureaucracy, willing to sell information about a witness. His jaw tightened. The plan was to gather intelligence on his network, identify key players, build a case that would take down more than just Torino himself. But something went wrong. David nodded grimly. Torino doesn't trust easily. He's been testing me, asking for small pieces of information, waiting to see if I'm legitimate. Last week, he demanded proof of my loyalty. Sarah's blood chilled. What kind of proof? Your location. David's voice was barely above a whisper. He wanted to know where Elena Vasquez was hiding. The world seemed to tilt, and I gave him an address in Oregon, an FBI safe house where an agent matching your description has been living under protection. She'll testify on Tuesday via video link, a decoy to make Torino think he's eliminated the real threat. Sarah stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. There's another woman pretending to be me, Agent Maria Santos. She volunteered when we realized how deep Torino's reach extended. She's been living your old life while you built this new one. The pieces began falling into place. That's why you've been so insistent about me staying in town, not traveling anywhere. We needed you invisible while Maria played Elena. And at work, 3 of Torino's men were arrested yesterday, trying to breach the Oregon safe house. Sarah felt tears building. Why didn't you tell me? David's hand found hers, warm and familiar. Because the fewer people who knew, the safer everyone was. Maria, you, me, we were all at risk if the operation was compromised. But you could have trusted me. Could I? David's eyes searched hers. Yesterday, when you found that photograph, your first instinct wasn't to ask for an explanation. It was to assume I'd betrayed you. If you'd run, if you'd tried to disappear, Torino would have known something was wrong. The truth stung because it was accurate. Sarah had been ready to believe the worst, to see betrayal where there might have been protection. I'm sorry, she whispered. David lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Don't be. You survived 6 months of hell by being suspicious, by not trusting easily. Those instincts kept you alive. As they sat in the fading afternoon light, Sarah realized that her trust in David wasn't the only thing at stake. In 2 days, she would testify, and then her usefulness to the FBI would end. David would move on to his next assignment, and Sarah, Chen, would have to decide whether to disappear into another new identity, or find the courage to build a real life. The night before her testimony, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was living borrowed time. David sat at her kitchen table, cleaning his service weapon with methodical precision, while she pretended to read but actually watched the way. Lamplight caught the planes of his face. After tomorrow, she said quietly, what happens to us? David's hands stilled on the gun. What do you want to happen? I want to stop running. The words surprised her with their certainty. I want to be Sarah Chen for real, not just because the FBI needs me to be. And me, his voice was carefully neutral. Do I fit into that picture? Sarah set down her book and moved to him, settling on his lap despite the partially disassembled weapon between them. That depends on whether you want to. David's arms came around her, solid and warm. Sarah, my job. Your job ends tomorrow, she interrupted. After I testify, Vincent Torino goes to prison, and you move on to protect someone else. I know that. It's not that simple. His hands traced slow patterns on her back. There are protocols, procedures. Witnesses don't get to keep relationships from their time in protection. Screw the protocols. Sarah cupped his face in her hands. I'm not asking the FBI for permission to love you. The word hung between them, finally spoken aloud. David's eyes darkened, and when he kissed her, it tasted like desperation and promise combined. They made love that night with an intensity born of impending separation. David's touch was reverent, as if he were memorizing every curve and response. Sarah poured 6 months of gratitude, trust, and growing love into each caress, each whispered endearment. Afterward, they lay entwined in her small bed, neither willing to sleep and lose precious hours. "I have something to tell you," David said against her hair, "about after tomorrow." Sarah's stomach clenched. "What?" "The Bureau wants to relocate you again after the trial. New identity, new city. They think Torino's associates might still pose a threat." The words hit like physical blows. "Where?" "Phoenix. There's an established network there, good protection protocols. Phoenix. Desert heat instead of mountain air, strip malls instead of her cozy bookshop, strangers instead of Mrs. Henderson and the other customers who'd become familiar faces." "What if I refuse?" David's arms tightened around her. "They can't force you." "But Sarah, these people don't forgive or forget. Even with Torino in prison, his organization will want revenge." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking, "Have you ever wanted to do something else besides being a federal marshal?" "Sometimes." His voice was thoughtful. "My grandfather had a ranch in Texas, nothing fancy, just cattle and horses. I used to think about what it would be like to work with my hands instead of a gun." "Why don't you?" "Because I'm good at this, at protecting people who need protecting." Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "What if the person who needed protecting wanted you to protect yourself for once? Wanted you to have a life instead of just a job?" David's eyes searched hers in the dim light. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe we both deserve a chance at something real. Something that isn't dictated by the FBI or Vincent Torino or anyone else." "Sarah, think about it," she whispered, and kissed him softly. "Just think about it." But even as they held each other, Sarah could feel time slipping away. In a few hours, she would sit in a federal courthouse and speak the words that would change everything. The life she'd built in Montana, the love she'd found with David, the safety of routine and predictability, all of it balanced on the edge of tomorrow. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the town in pristine white. Sarah watched it through the window and wondered if she was seeing the last peaceful moment she'd have for a very long time. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it the weight of what lay ahead. David was already awake, coffee brewing, his marshals face firmly in place, professional, alert, ready. The tender lover from the night before had retreated behind duty and protocol. "Ready?" he asked, though they both knew she'd never truly be ready to face Vincent Torino again, even through the safety of a video link. Sarah nodded, straightening her shoulders. Whatever came next, she would face it with courage. She'd survived 6 months in hiding. She could survive one day of testimony. But as David opened the door to escort her to the courthouse, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking toward the end of everything she'd come to treasure. The testimony lasted for hours. Sarah sat in a secure room in the federal courthouse, facing a camera that transmitted her image to the courtroom, where Vincent Torino waited in shackles. She couldn't see him, but she felt his presence like a weight on her chest as she recounted every detail of that night behind her bookshop in Seattle. David stood guard outside the room, his presence a comfort even through the closed door. When it was over, when the prosecutor thanked her and the video link went dark, Sarah felt simultaneously emptied and free. "It's done," she said to David as they left the courthouse. "It's done," he agreed, but his tone was strange, distant. They drove back to her bookshop in silence, the weight of unfinished conversations filling the space between them. Sarah knew that FBI agents were waiting to discuss her relocation, that paperwork and new identities and fresh starts were being prepared. But for this moment, she wanted to pretend that tomorrow wasn't coming. The bookshop felt different now, no longer a sanctuary, but a place she was already beginning to remember in past tense. David helped her pack personal items, books she couldn't bear to leave behind, the few photographs from her new life that felt precious. "Sarah," he began, then stopped. "I know." She didn't look at him, focusing instead on wrapping a ceramic mug in newspaper. "You have to go back to Washington. New assignment, new witness to protect." "Actually," David said quietly, "I resigned this morning." Sarah's hands stilled. "What?" "I submitted my resignation to the Bureau effective immediately." David moved closer, his voice uncertain. "I told them I was burned out, needed a change. But your career, my career has been about protecting people. And the person I most want to protect just told me she's tired of running. Sarah turned to face him, hardly daring to hope. David, that ranch in Texas I told you about, it's for sale. Has been for 2 years since my grandfather died. He pulled an envelope from his jacket, not transfer papers or FBI documents, but real estate listings and loan applications. I've been thinking about what you said, about having a life instead of just a job. Tears blurred Sarah's vision. Are you asking me to run away with you? I'm asking you to stop running with me. David's hands framed her face gently. The Bureau can create Sarah Chen's death as easily as they created Elena Vasquez's. We could start over, both of us, as whoever we want to be. What about Torino's associates? The threats? Torino was convicted today. His organization is in chaos, and frankly, a woman who died in Montana isn't worth pursuing when they have bigger problems. David's thumb traced her cheekbone. We'd still be careful, still be smart, but we'd be free. Sarah thought of desert sunsets and wide-open spaces, of building something real with the man who'd already helped her rebuild once. What would we do on a ranch? Raise cattle, horses, maybe kids someday, if you want them. David's smile was soft, hopeful. Grow old together without looking over our shoulders. The future stretched before them, uncertain but theirs to choose. Sarah had spent so long being someone else's creation, first Elena Vasquez, then Sarah Chen, then a federal witness, that the idea of simply being herself felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Yes, she whispered. David's kiss tasted like promises and new beginnings as they held each other in the bookshop that had sheltered their love. Sarah realized that sometimes the best protection wasn't hiding from your past, but choosing who you wanted to face the future with. 3 months later, Maria Santos, formerly Elena Vasquez, in the FBI's records, bought a small ranch outside Austin, Texas. With her husband Miguel, they raised quarter horses and kept a few head of cattle. And Maria opened a small bookshop in town that specialized in romance novels and rare first editions. Sometimes, when the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, Maria would think about the woman she used to be and the life she'd left behind. But mostly, she thought about the man beside her, the horses in their pasture, and the quiet miracle of building something real from the ashes of everything she'd lost. The past would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had chosen love over safety, truth over convenience, and hope over fear. And in the end, perhaps that was the greatest protection of all. A question for you. Sarah gave up the guaranteed safety of witness protection for an uncertain future with David, trusting that love could provide better security than any government program. In your opinion, was her choice brave or reckless when facing life's biggest decisions? Should we prioritize safety and practicality, or is there wisdom in following our hearts even when the outcome isn't guaranteed? What would you have chosen in her position?